Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, this is going to be an awesome episode. If you've ever struggled with post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, this podcast is for you. And if you stay to the end, we're going to give you 3 things that you can do today to help with your mental health. My friend Robert put out an amazing book. I have it right here. You can't see it because of the background, but I've written it. I've read it 3 times. Marked my way through it. Underlined it. If you want to get an amazing book, and audio book will be coming out soon. You definitely need to check it out. So, Robert, my brother, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
I love it.
Um,
So, my first question is, what is your definition of resiliency?
my definition of resiliency, it's your ability to bounce back from bad things that happen to you. You know, you can't get through life without bad things happening. Negative consequences from whatever, and that we've all heard the saying, it's not what happens to you that matters, it's how you respond to it that makes all the difference. And that's absolutely true. And it's just like I talk about in my book, the quotes from the Rocky movie. Uh, he says it in almost every movie, I think. I never checked to see if it's actually in every movie, but I think it's in most of them where he talks about, life is going to kick your butt. It's going to knock you down and beat you up and leave you for dead if you let it. But it's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And that's how winning is done, right? So to me, that's the definition of resilience is taking the hits and keep moving forward because they're going to
And
come.
I, yep, and I totally agree. And like in poker terms, sometimes you could take a bad beat, but you just have to be able to come back on the next hand and
Yep.
play your hand, the hand that you're dealt, so you can start winning again. You can't just focus on that bad beat, or else you're going to be out of the game uh, in a matter of moments, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's a saying in the poker world. We say a chip in a chair. That's all you need is a chip and a chair, and you can win a tournament. And I'll tell you, that couldn't be more true. There are some parallels with the poker world. There was a tournament that I was in one time where I was literally down to 50 chips. Just a $50 chip, and the big blind at that point in the game was like 2,000. So I was more or less out of the game, but I had this 50 chip and I played it and I doubled up, and then I doubled up again, and I doubled up again, and I tripled up. And before you know it, I was back in the game because I didn't give up. A lot of people, would give up at that point and just throw it in with any 2 cards. Well, I was patient enough, and the timing worked out. I just waited for the best cards I thought I could get at the time and played them as best as I could, and it worked out. And I ended up making the final table in that tournament.
Yeah, and I've been
So,
told, if you got dealt a 2 and a 7, you're pretty much screwed. But I've actually ended up with 3 aces and 2 sevens, so I don't believe in that. I believe that you got to play to the end. You can't just quit in the middle of a hand.
well, yeah, it's like the song, the Kenny Rogers, the where he talks about poker. Every hand's a winner and every hand's a loser. And you have to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. And that goes with life too, in general. Um, the hand you're dealt can be a winner or a loser. It's all in what you do with it. You just like in poker, you get bad cards, you could fold. You could just say, these cards suck. I hate this game. You just fold or whatever, right? But someone who's seasoned and has a more positive attitude would think for a moment and go, okay, can I bluff in this situation? My cards are absolute garbage, but with the right bet, can I still win the hand? And that's a good parallel to life as well, as you make the best of what you got.
Yep.
And
Now, give us a quick rundown about yourself, where you come from, a little bit about your military career, and then tell us a little bit about your post-military career.
Okay, yeah, I have a rather unique background. I served in the Army twice. I'll go all the way back to the beginning. I graduated from high school early, about 2 years early, and didn't know what the heck I was going to do with my life. And by a very strange series of events, a very serendipitous series of events, I found myself in the Army at the age of 17, and I was an intelligence analyst, and I served most of that time in Germany. I learned to speak German. I had a German girlfriend. My best friend was a German Army guy. And I was over there for 4 years. Had a good time. Did a lot of intelligence work over there. And then I wanted to get out to see what I could do in the quote unquote real world. And so I decided to join the Ohio National Guard. That way I wouldn't burn any bridges. And that way, if the real world didn't work out so well, I could go back on active duty pretty easy from there. So I joined the Ohio National Guard, and during that time, I wound up getting into banking and finance. And I was a banker for 20 years. And I did everything on the retail side of banking. I was a branch manager, business banking officer, loan officer, financial advisor, pretty much everything that you might find in a retail bank. And in 2008, the economy crashed, as you know, and banks were shutting down, including the bank I was working for. I lost my job and didn't know what in the heck I was going to do at that point. Do I risk burning through my savings, waiting for things to get better, or do I find something else to do and not burn out through all the savings I worked so hard for? And then I was outside and I was in my backyard by my fire pit one evening, and the idea just hit me like a light bulb. I'm going to go back in the Army. I was 43 years old at the time, but I told my wife, I said, I'm going back in the Army. She's like, you can't do that. I said, don't tell me I can't do something, because then I'm definitely going to do it. But I went back into the Army at the age of 43. I put myself through basic training, going to the gym every day. I was working out twice a day, 6 days a week, and I dropped 50 pounds in 2 months. And I was back in shape. I could pass the PT test without any problem. And then I went and talked to a recruiter, and even the recruiter thought I was crazy. I mean, how many 43-year-olds do you think walk into a recruiter's office? But anyway, I got back in, and unfortunately, we were training. During training, I ended up fracturing my spine, and I didn't know it was fractured. When the injury occurred, the medics did a quick X-ray and didn't see anything. And here's some ibuprofen, some water, go back to work, right? Typical military. And so I did, and I had this pain, but I just chalked it up to old man-itis. I'm a 43-year-old guy trying to keep up with dudes in their 20s. It's no wonder I have back pain. So I just kept grunting through it, soldiered through it, and we were training up. We were getting ready to go to Afghanistan, and I went through 18 months of training, standing up a new brigade and getting ready to go to Afghanistan at the same time. And then my symptoms showed up one day. I went for a run with one of my soldiers, and my first sergeant too. And my legs stopped working about a mile into the run. It was the weirdest craziest thing I could ever describe. It's my brain was telling my legs to run, but my legs were like, nope, we're just gonna drag today. So I was literally like dragging my feet, and my soldier wanted to throw me over his shoulder to carry me back to the barracks. Something told me that was a bad idea, and it probably was a bad idea because the fracture was right by my heart at T7 and 8, and it could have made it worse if he had done that. But he managed to help me get back, and they took me to the hospital, and they did an MRI and found the fracture. And I ended up having to have surgery, and the doctors told me, you may not walk again. And just before I went under, I had a few choice words for that colonel. I won't repeat here on this podcast, but he understood because I was under the influence. But I said, I will walk out of this hospital. And I did 75 days later. It wasn't easy, but I had to learn how to walk again. And naturally, I was medically retired as a result. And then I bought a franchise. And due to my disability and some other issues that arose with them, that's all in the book. I ended up selling in the store, and I've been pretty much retired ever since. But then I play poker. I'm a semi-professional poker player now and an author. I wrote Bobby, telling my crazy life story with the hopes of reaching out to someone who might be depressed or thinking about suicide, and say, hey, you know what? No matter how bad it gets, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. It will get better. I'm living
All
proof
right,
of it.
so yep. Now we're both disabled. We're both medically disabled veterans.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's different when you don't go out on your own terms and you're going out on somebody else's terms. And then for me, it was when they told me that I was no longer Sergeant Kaufman. Well, wait a minute. I put in 23 years of being Sergeant Kaufman. Now you're telling me that I'm not? And when I had to hang up the uniform for that last time, that really destroyed me. So, what was your medical transition like when you got out?
Oh, it was very difficult. The injury, from the point that the symptoms showed up to the point I was actually retired, it took just about 2 years for them to do that. The med board process was an absolute joke at the time. And of course, the unit, the culture in the military, and the more I talk to other veterans and even active duty personnel, the more I realize this is a prevalent culture in the military, regardless of the branch. And that is, once you become ill or injured, you go from hero to zero overnight.
Yep.
I was one of the most highly decorated NCOs in the entire brigade at the time. And when this injury surfaced, I went from hero to zero. Basically, they treated me like I was a piece of crap, because the culture is, oh, he's faking it, he's just trying to get over, he's just trying to get benefits, he doesn't deserve, all this stuff. Totally uncalled for. I mean, how do you fake a fractured spine? I'd like to know. But they were, of course, everybody's a doctor, right? Oh, I have back problems too, but I'm still going to Afghanistan, and you hear all this stuff, and 2 years worth of that really beats you up. It can destroy you mentally. And that's where my downward spiral, so to speak, actually began, was during that process. Because when I got out, I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, severe depression, in other words, as a result of all that. So I have a cold, so sorry if I sound congested. But yeah, it was rough, and that's something we need to. It's part of that stigma you mentioned a minute ago. Um, that's the stigma in the military, is that, if you're ill or injured, you're a loser. You're a piece of crap trying to get over on something or get out of work or whatever. That's the automatic assumption. And I actually had my first sergeant was actively trying to trip me up to get me kicked out so I wouldn't get any benefits.
Now, you actually ended up with a weapon in your hand, correct?
Yep. Yeah.
So let's talk about that, because a lot of shows they don't talk about the real stuff. They kind of scoot around the subject of suicides and attempted suicides, and people know that I've had a suicide attempt. So take us back to that day, brother. And I know it's in
Yeah.
your book. That's why I got it from. So take us back to that day.
Yeah, it was when I had that franchise. I had a bad day. What had happened was, it's a long story, but the franchise representatives from corporate would come in occasionally and check to make sure that the store matches their layout and the way they want it to look, and which makes perfect sense. Any franchise, they all want all the stores to look the same, right?
Yep.
Well, the flag that I was given for retiring, that I quite literally broke my back for, I had it hanging on my back wall by my desk, and nobody ever complained. Of course, it's the American flag. And these folks, these two yahoos, they weren't 5 feet inside my store, and one of them points at the flag as the first thing they notice, and it's all the way in the back. Points at that flag and says, "You have to take that down." And I said, "Why is that?" They said, "Well, it doesn't match our layout plan, whatever." And I said, "Well, I'm not taking it down. I literally broke my back for my country and earned that flag. It's not coming down." He said, "You have to take it down." I said, "No." I said, "Show me a court order that says I have to take it down, then I will. Until then, it's staying up." So they got mad. They left. There wasn't a whole lot they could do about it, really. But then a few months goes by, and there was a business owner in the city that spent about $3,000 a month in my store, and that paid my rent and utilities. Well, they sent a salesperson into his office and offered him the same rates on the product that I was paying as a franchisee, effectively cutting me out of that deal. Now, he called me as soon as they left his office and told me, "Hey, this is what they offered me. Can you match it?" I said, "Well, I can't match it because that's what it cost me." And I said, "But I don't blame you for taking that deal." But that was the beginning of what led to my attempt. So I was hurting. Three grand a month out of your pocket, that hurts. So rather than give up, right? I'm like, okay, how do I overcome this? How do I find a way um, to make this a non-issue? And the only way to do that is to get more business. So, long story short, I wound up getting a deal with the local exposition center where they have a lot of trade shows and stuff. I got a deal with them to set up at their location during when they were selling sports memorabilia, so that I could ship all of their stuff. The $100,000 baseball bat that they bought signed by Babe Ruth or whatever, I could ship it safe and insured to wherever they wanted me to send it. So that's why they had me there, and I made more money in a week at that show than I made in at least 3 or 4 months of running the store, which more than made up for that 3 grand a month. I was like, stick to 3 grand a month. I just made up for it. And it's December. It's right before Christmas time. And I go I get in the store, I open up, I log into the computer, and I was excited because it was payday. I was going to give my employees not just their paycheck, but a big fat bonus too that they weren't expecting. So I log into my bank account and it shows a big fat zero. And I'm like, I go into panic mode. I immediately think, oh my God, somebody hacked my account. Somebody got the information, they stole the money, blah, blah, blah. And I started looking, and I noticed that the money was withdrawn by the franchise headquarters. And I was like, what is going on? I called them, and they said, listen, we do not authorize you to be at that show. Therefore, you do not have any rights to any of the profits arising from that show. Yeah. So now I'm thinking, okay, what do I do? I still have to pay my employees. So I told everybody at the store, I said, listen, I'm going to go for a walk. I need to figure stuff out. They didn't know what was going on. I told them, well, I need to figure some stuff out. So I left. And I went for a walk in the local, they call it the Metro Parks, the Emerald Necklace of Northern Ohio. Beautiful park system, and it's huge. And I went for a walk, and I intended to just clear my head and figure out how I was going to get together enough money to pay these employees their paychecks. It's right before Christmas. So the more I walked, the more I depressed I got. And at one point, I remembered that I had my Glock 9mm in the trunk of my car, because I had planned on going to the local range later that day. The owner was an actual good customer of mine, and he kept asking me, when are you going to come shooting at the range? And that day was the day I decided I was going to shoot at the range. So I had my Glock and some ammo and everything in the trunk, and I went and got it, put it in my belt, and kept walking. And I didn't realize this until after the fact, but by the time I came to rest on this giant boulder. The boulder is so large that you could probably fit at least 5 grown men on it sitting across. That's how it gives you an idea how big this boulder is. I'm sitting on this boulder looking at the river, and there's a ferret or a mink or a weasel or something like that on the opposite shore eating crayfish, looking at me like, what is this dude doing here? And it had been 8 hours since I started walking at this point. And the sun was setting behind me over my left shoulder, if you can picture this. Now I'm in the forest, so it's already pretty dark, but there's beams of light coming through the trees from behind me, right? And I put the gun to my head and I started to pull the trigger. And that's when what I think is a miracle intervened. The trees in front of me opened up, and sunlight came through the trees, and I could feel heat on my face, just like the sun on your face. And at that same exact moment, I also heard Carrie Underwood singing Jesus Take the Wheel, as if she were standing right in front of me. Now, that could have been in my head, probably was in my head, or it could have been somebody driving by, but it doesn't matter. It made me drop the gun. And today, sorry, it's hard to talk about that. Today, I'm so grateful that I didn't, because if you compare my life today to what it was on that day, it's been completely upgraded in every way you can possibly imagine, and then some. And it's been a crazy ride, and it's still mostly unwritten, the happy ending. But I actually added a bonus chapter to the book about some of my happy ending with playing poker and whatnot. So yeah, that's how it all went down. Um, I when now think about this for a second. The sun was setting over my left shoulder. So how did it come through the trees in front of me? I can't explain it. And when I was writing the book, first thing that came to my mind when I was writing this part was, geez, I wonder if it's just my memory playing tricks on me, or if I'm just remembering it differently than what had happened. So I actually retraced my steps, not the whole 8 hours, but the end of it. I went back to that location, and the strangest thing happened and I have pictures of all this. Thank God we have phones and we can take pictures of this stuff, because nobody would ever believe me otherwise. I wasn't more than, I don't know, 2 or 3 steps into the woods when I noticed there was a squirrel on a tree at exactly eye level with me, looking right at me like, "How you doing?" I was like, "Oh, nice. Hey, what's up, squirrel?" Just didn't pay it much mind. And then I take another step and I look down, and there's another squirrel to my left walking with me. And the squirrel that was on the tree kept jumping from tree to tree, staying eye level with me the whole time. And I took pictures of him because I was like, nobody's going to believe this. And he was chirping, they're like, both squirrels are chirping. I don't, I don't know what that means, if anything, but it was weird. So anyway, I continued walking. The squirrel stayed with me the whole time. I got down to where the boulder was, and the boulder was still there, but it had moved. Now, keep in mind, it had been 10 years since I'd been to this spot. The boulder had moved about 5 or 6 feet down the shoreline, or whatever you want to call it, by the river there. It moved like 5 or 6 feet further down towards the river, and it had split in half. And it split in half it looked like a knife had cut through butter. It wasn't like a crack. It was like it was cut. And it was cut from, it's really weird, from the point that I was sitting, from east to west, it was cut in half, this boulder. I've got pictures of it. It's crazy. And I thought, okay, now let me sit down where I was sitting. I had to sit like on the side of the boulder because it was split in half. But I faced the same exact direction that I was facing that day, sitting on that boulder. And I pulled my compass out because I wanted to see, was the sun setting in front of me and I'm just thinking it was behind me? No, I was facing not close to, not nearly, but exactly due east when I was sitting on that boulder. So, which means that the sun was in fact setting behind me. So how did it come through from the east? I don't know. And the boulder was split from east to west.
I guess that's a God thing.
I don't know. I don't know.
So what was the impetus of writing Bobby?
Oh, what made me write the book?
Yeah.
Looking back on our lives, I think everybody could probably say this about certain parts of their life. You look back on things that happen, you realize that some things were supposed to happen. And you're supposed to do certain things. I talk about a whole bunch of them in the book, going all the way back to my childhood. Things that didn't make sense how they even happened in the first place, but looking back, you can see how and why. But writing the book was one of those. It goes all the way back to, I had decided one day that I love Cadillacs, and I had a Cadillac at the time, CTS, and I wanted a new one because the one I had was old and it was, time to trade it in. So I thought, well, At that particular time, I was, had two stepdaughters in college, which isn't cheap, and a lot of expenses in that regard. And so I thought, well, if I want a new Cadillac, I better find a way to bring in some more money. So I decided to drive for Uber, and then I heard about Uber Black and Lyft Black, which is their premium service in the Cleveland area. And they call it different things in different markets, but it's their premium service. It's meant to be like one step away from a limo ride.
Yep.
And if you take an Uber or Lyft before, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But I thought, well, if I'm going to drive Uber, I might as well do their premium service because I'm getting a Cadillac anyway. And the only catch was I had to get a black Cadillac with a black leather interior, which wouldn't have been my first choice because that's murder in the summertime. But anyway, I got the black Cadillac and got signed up with Uber and Lyft Black. And I drove around Cleveland for a couple of years doing that. And I was doing that for a reason, and it's because I like to tell stories from my background. Some passengers, I'm an outgoing person. I love to talk, and some passengers like to talk, others didn't. If they didn't, I shut up. But if they like to talk, I would tell stories, from my background, from being an intel analyst and a banker and all this stuff. And by the time I finished driving, I had over 5,000 trips. And the most common comment that I got from passengers was, dude, you should write a book. Then I kept hearing that over and over and over. Hundreds of people kept telling me that. and I'm like, what? Yeah, write a book about what? I'm nobody. I'm just a disabled veteran. Haven't really done anything, worth writing about, right? And I kept thinking, and I kept hearing this from the passengers, and I was like, man, why in the heck should I write a book? And then I remember, it's like, oh yeah, 10 years ago I almost took my own life, but I didn't. And that's a story worth telling. To try to reach out to other people and say, hey, don't do it, man. Right?
Yep.
Because things will get better. It will get better.
Now, this is a teaching podcast, so if there's a veteran or a first responder out there, what would be your top 3 pieces of advice if they're looking to take their own lives? And by the way, one thing I appreciate your book is one of your pages is all the numbers that people can reach out to if they're struggling to get help. And I appreciate that because I thought that I've never seen that in a book before. And I thought that could be a lifesaver right there. So what would be your top 3 pieces of advice if somebody's struggling with their mental health today?
Well, one of the things that a phrase that I heard somewhere, I can't remember where I heard it or who I heard it from, but I heard once somebody said, think about what you think about. And for me, it's a way of bringing myself to the present. And think about what I'm thinking about. Is your self-talk, is it all negative? Is it destructive? Is it hurtful? You got to quit doing that. Focus on positive things instead. Focus on things that you want to happen, things that you're going to do that are positive. Just avoid negative thoughts of any kind as best you can. It takes practice. It's not easy. But I'm to the point now where I can literally shut off all my thoughts and actually blank my mind and meditate. And meditating does help. So I would say, think about learning about meditating. And think about what you think about. Talk to somebody. Go for a walk. walks are good. Maybe not an 8 hour long walk in a park like I did, but sometimes just being out in nature is helpful. You know, fresh air and sunshine, and socializing too is very important. When you get depressed, you tend to isolate and withdraw, and that's it's probably the worst thing you can do, is to isolate yourself. You don't want to do that. Try to be, if at all possible, try to be around people that are your friends, people that care about you. And that will remind you why you need to hang around those same people, right?
And guys, if you're struggling right now, hang up, get your phone, dial
call
988 and hit the number 1, and you can get some help right now as we're speaking.
Absolutely. Dial 988 if you need to. Talk to a loved one, but don't do it.
So Bobby, where do we get your book? How do we get in touch with you? How do we find you?
Well, my book, Bobby, There's Always a Light at the End of the Tunnel, can be found on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kindle, and it should be out next month in audiobook. The voice actor is literally working on it as we speak. So yeah, that should be done sometime next month, I hope, as long as there aren't any other delays. And in my book, I actually put a excuse me. In my book, I put an email address in the book twice. I mentioned it twice in there, and it's specifically for that book, and it's for people. What I say in my book is, listen, if you're one of those people that's struggling, and my book has somehow helped you to decide to keep trying, I want to know about that. I want to hear your story, even if it's anonymous. I want to know, because that's the whole reason I wrote the book. I don't care if I make a dime off of it if it saves somebody.
Well, I know that your book affected me. It's given me some things to think about. I love the book. I got it right here. You can't see it in the background of me, but I have it right there.
Oh yeah, I can see it.
Yep. So I actually love it, and I sent you my book. I sent you my ebook through your email. You should have that.
Yep.
So, brother, I just want to say thank you for your friendship, most of all, and I'm grateful for your friendship. And hopefully, we can build a generational relationship from this moment on.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's what it's all about. My goal in life is to prevent as many suicides as possible from here on forward. Whether it's 1 or 100, I don't know, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah. And guys, if you get a chance, I'm big on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. Make sure you check out his LinkedIn profile. It's a great profile. It tells you a lot about what he's doing. So, brother, I just want to say thank you, and I'm truly humbled and grateful for your friendship.
Oh, same here, man. And that one last thing to mention is that the book actually got an endorsement from a 2-star general who works in the Pentagon.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Talk about a blessing. Wow. Yeah, that's a whole cool story in and of itself. But we need another 20 minutes or so to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, and guys, like I say, as the way I end every interview is, like Joel Osteen says, every morning we wake up, we have a choice. We can be a victim of our past, or we can be a victor of our present and our future. If you guys show up every week and listen to this podcast, you are no longer victims of your past. You're victors of your future. And I love you guys, and I appreciate you guys. And remember that vertical momentum, the only way to go is up. I love you guys. Bobby, my brother, have a great week.
You too, man. And remember, think about what you think about.
Definitely think about what you think about. I love it. Have a great week.
All right, you too.